Kick your dad off the computer. Because for 1 week, you'll be needing both. Presenting at MTV Week, where we combine the power of MTV and MTV.com to create a uniquely dynamic musical experience. All week on MTV, you'll see live performances of new music by Hanson, Rough Riders, Cash Money, NSYNC, Smashing Pumpkins, and AC/DC. Plus, they'll play songs you demand online at MTV.com, where you'll also find exclusive chats, interactive videos, auctions, remixes, and many other surprises. It all culminates on Saturday with Ultrasound Rock and Roll Feuds 2, where you play referee online. At MTV Week, it's the new definition of crossing over. All this week, starting with TRL at 3:30.
R. Replication. Today's videos on MTV2 are brought to you by the letter R.
Good crowd for Christmas Eve, fellas, man. Wouldn't you say? Hey, live. No kidding.
Hey, I really enjoyed that.
Hey, we put on a good show.
Ooh, they like that grapevine.
It's so deserted out here, though.
You see that big old grapevine?
Excellent gig, guys.
Uh-oh. There goes the last bus.
So call me a cab.
Hey, man, you're a cab.
No sweat, it's Christmas Eve. Next reindeer's due any minute.
Come on, now.
You know, there's Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen. Oh, but do you recall the most famous reindeer of all? Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw him, you would even say it glows. All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. They never laughed for Rudolph, joining in the reindeer game. Then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, oh, yeah. Hey, Rudolph! With your nose so bright, come on, and got my sleigh tonight, yeah. How the reindeer loved him, as they shouted out with glee. Hey, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, you'll go down in history. Hey, Rudolph, come on, I got my sleigh. Hey, Rudolph,
Man, these raisins, man, they got it. These raisins, they got it, dude. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. That is the California Raisins right there with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Welcome to the News Underground. This is Abandoned Nihilism. I am the harbinger of Rismus. Watch the hell out. That's right. It's a cringy millennial using Zoomer terminology. One of the look, you won't get this if you're a Zoomer. Who's that guy that appeared on my screen? Santa Claus. It was Santa Claus. What was I saying? No, but big props to the California Raisins there. No, the millennial using using Zoomer terminology. One of the things that is really fun when you get older is destroying the new slang of the youth by using it. It's a lot of fun. As long as you don't go past the irony and you start using it unironically, like a Keemstar or something. It's like, cut it off, dog. You know, Kyle Kulinski is doing that too, and it's like, oh, come on, man. I don't know. He didn't have much of a. It doesn't seem like he had much of a youth. He as soon as he got out of college, he immediately started his show, and he's been doing it nonstop ever since. So, you weren't saying anything. The universe was created seconds ago. You need to get laid. You need to get a boyfriend and get laid, Chem Goblin. But welcome to the Rismas special here on the News Underground. We're just keeping it real chill today. You know, Woke Patriot was nice enough to give me this amazing claymation Christmas junkie, the story of a Christmas junkie animation, claymation that was made by William S. Burroughs. And it's so good, I'm going to save it until next year. It's literally so good, I'm going to save it until next year. Because I had this planned. We're gonna watch a History Channel documentary. We're gonna watch a History Channel documentary called the Real Christmas Story. So I don't know what the angle is. I've never seen this before. I'm curious to hear what the History Channel. This was like 10 years ago. This is at least 10 years. If it's not being taken down off the internet, they're not reselling it. It's not on a subscription service, so they're not reselling it. So they're not taking it off the internet. Oh, there is one licensed music in it. Okay, that's fine. So I have no idea. And if anyone doesn't know, if maybe you're from out of the country, from the United States, you don't know what the funny thing about the History Channel is that the History Channel is everything but history. They literally spend more time on aliens and Adolf Hitler than they do on like any other subject or topic, right? It's like you're more likely to get real information from the Home Shopping Network than you are from the History Channel. So I'm curious to see what they think the real story of Christmas is. And I'm crossing my fingers that aliens are involved. I'm crossing my fingers. Okay, hold on. Also, big props to Strategy Member, who did some legwork. And you got to take a look at this, folks. Just a little addendum to yesterday. Let me copy this link over here. But Strategy Member over here did the legwork, discovered that I was incorrect in my assumption that taxpayer dollars were paying for this NORAD Santa tracker nonsense. But I'm also not really pleased with this news that these people are volunteers and that they're not getting paid for this. Which is like, come on, fucking Christmas. We need money more than ever. I don't think there's millionaires over here and we're volunteering. These people should be getting paid for this. I wasted almost 4 minutes of Debbie's time, or Bonnie, whatever her name was, nice lady, and she didn't get paid for any of that. That's unbelievable. So big props to your boy Strategy Member for doing the legwork here. Apparently really had to do some digging to fact check this. And you know what? Unlike other streamers, and I know I'm probably gonna bite my tongue saying this, but I honestly do find it very useful and very helpful to have people who are checking me in the chat so that I can make sure I'm being as accurate as possible, because I'm being 100% with you. I'm not trying to sell you on some ideology that I'm obsessed with, and it's the only way. I'm looking for the truth. I'm looking for reality. That's what I'm looking for. So any assistance I can get in that effort is greatly appreciated, because I'm trying not to. My only bias is for mankind's prosper. For mankind to prosper. You know what I'm saying? Like, my bias is that I want everyone to be happy and healthy and be left alone and be given liberty and freedom. That's my bias. So I appreciate people like Strategy Member, like Woke Patriot, like Davey, like Chem Goblin, and all the other contributors in the Discord who are giving me this information, taking time out of their day after the stream to do some digging for me. So I do appreciate that. Thank you so much, strategy member. Merry fucking Christmas. Merry fucking Rizmas. I'm going to destroy this word. I'm going to fuck this word up, dude. I'm going to fuck this word up. Riz is absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to fuck it up. I'm going to use it so much it's going to die. I did something just before I opened the channel today. The inch in tire size has nothing to do with the imperial system being better. It's because it approaches pi in centimeters, which I agree with. But I still find any source confirming it. Oh, trust me, I know. I used to watch it. Oh, you're talking about History Channel. I've seen them Hancock being praised. Also, Debbie is being pretty professional. Yeah, she's a very professional woman. Don't worry, you're always right. You're the leader. We follow without question. I don't. That is the exact opposite of my message, Chem Goblin. By you saying that, that tells me you're not listening. And you got to do better. Okay? I expect better. Okay? That is the exact opposite of what I'm talking about. So get your head on straight, buddy. All right, let's get this shit started. 40 minutes of fucking History Channel. Here we go. The real story of Christmas, folks. The real story of Christmas. God damn it, Kim Goblin. There's no winning with you. Rizmas. No, I'm going to change this. Don't worry. This cringe is not going to stay. All right, let's get it going, folks. It's movie time. Starting a cult. The cult is called democracy. Okay, and look, if you wanna slavishly and obsess over democracy, go for it. Go fucking bananas, please. Okay, but yeah, the cult is called democracy. Join it.
Christmas. Up goes the tree, on go the lights. There really is no place like home for the holidays. An exciting season of presents and parties only a Scrooge could hate. But where did all the traditions start? Why do we hang stockings? When did we start singing Christmas carols and decorating trees?
Who cares? What's the real
How
story
did
of
Santa
Christmas?
get the red suit, the sleigh, and 8 tiny reindeer? There's a hidden history behind all of our modern customs. Some of the origins are dark and mystical. Some are simply about making money. So brace yourself for the truth behind the holiday we love. It's the real story of Christmas.
This is stupid. Why did I pick this one? This sucks. I should have found a better one. This is gonna suck.
Well, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Excuse me. I'll make it more
Everywhere you
That's so
go.
true. That's actually a good point.
Take a look at the 5 and 10, glistening once again with candy canes and
Man,
silk.
this is gonna get my ass DMCA, dude. I'm. You know what? It's loud. Oh, it's too loud. Turn your fucking volume down. Then you got a fucking volume switch, don't you?
Seem to start dressing up earlier and earlier.
Is the holly that will be
These
on
days,
your
the holiday
own.
party starts in most places just
turned it
after
down. I turned
Halloween.
it down.
And that's because it's a big, big business nationwide. The spending for holiday decorations and gifts adds up to over $15 billion each year. There are Santas at every shopping mall from coast to coast, sleighs full of toys,
Yeah, I did
and
this.
there are lights. Lots and lots of lights.
We liked lights. As little kids, I think we all jumped in the family car and drove through different neighborhoods to see the lights.
Now for this glorious
Decor
leader
Light
crap.
Industries is one of the largest holiday decorating
There are no gods. There are only men. Enough of this glorious leader bullshit.
companies in the United States. Its designers and craftsmen create the splashiest of Christmas displays for public squares and shopping malls across the country.
We like big.
This is crap.
You know, we like our deer big. We like our trees big.
I thought this was
The
going to be
500
cool.
miles of
really should
modern
have checked
Christmas
this.
lights DECRA uses
Hold
each
on.
year are a lot more complex compared to the earliest holiday
This
lights
sucks.
commercially available.
I don't want to watch this. Hold on.
When were the first electric Christmas lights invented?
No one fucking cares.
In 1882 by Edison Company Vice President Edward Johnson.
Okay. Whatever.
Later, General
No,
Electric
no.
offered strings of 24 bulbs for $12. which is equal to $280
Most of them would have
today.
photographs of one.
No, we're not. No.
This bright idea is often credited to a New England telephone worker.
Okay, I don't fucking care. I honestly do not care. What am I going to do? Unless I was playing some kind of board game about Christmas facts, I would not fucking watch this. No, we're switching it up, folks. We're changing it up. Plan B. We're not going to watch The Real Christmas Story. No one fucking cares about who invented Christmas bulbs. Holy shit. We're going to talk about the Christmas truce, folks. Now, the Christmas truce is a fascinating thing that happened during World War II, where two opposing sides that have just spent the last several years, probably, at least several months, killing each other, absolutely eviscerating each other, and then just decided on Christmas Day to go play some football together. So we're going to do the Christmas truce instead, okay? We're not going to do the real Christmas and then start talking about the goddamn... I thought they were going to be like, they did touch on the capitalism stuff. But, man, I don't want to wade through the history of Christmas bulbs to get to the good, nuggets, criticism about capitalism. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about something more interesting. God Emperor of the Imperium, stop this! Let's watch Vikings instead. At least they brought us Christmas trees. Yep, sounds like the History Channel. No, so let's watch this. We're going to watch the Christmas Truce. It's an absolutely amazing story about mankind. It's almost like, the pacifists, they always talk about, well, what if the soldiers just put their guns down? What if the soldiers just decided not to fight? We've seen stuff like this throughout history, but it is pretty rare. And this is just an absolutely fascinating story. So let's do this one instead.
Hi everybody, welcome to this Timeline documentary. My name is Dan Snow, and here I am in a Lancaster bomber cockpit, one of the few remaining Lancasters from the Second World War, to tell you about my new history channel. It's called History Hit. It's like Netflix.
Wow, don't give a fuck. It probably doesn't even exist anymore. It's probably a network and fucking streaming service that doesn't even exist anymore. I don't see that guy subscribing to my shit.
I know this sounds like a fairy tale, but I assure you it's perfectly true.
It's loud, I'm turning it down.
The most wonderful day. You will hardly credit what I'm going to tell you, but thousands of our men will be writing home today, telling the same strange and wonderful story.
This is history's most memorable Christmas. A celebration in the midst of slaughter.
History Channel.
It's autumn 1914.
History.
The world
Christmas.
is at war. German forces have invaded France and Belgium. Britain, through a series of alliances, is drawn into the conflict. The British Army is sent overseas to help its allies fight back against the Germans.
The first few months of the Great War were an incredible period. It's a clash of two mighty empires, the French and the Germans, and they both have their own plans. One, the Germans are going to sweep round through Belgium and crash into northern France, aiming up either side of Paris, whilst the French are going to drive into their lost provinces of Alsace-Lorraine. So you get this sort of circular, almost motion, and those are the two great visions of what will happen. What does happen is it all goes wrong.
The Germans had come sweeping through Belgium and into France with their Schlieffen plan, the intention being to knock the French out of the war very, very quickly so that they could then turn and face the Russians on the Eastern Front. And the plan had failed. It had stalled on the River Marne, where the French and the British had counterattacked.
This is crucial.
Wow, that's a crazy photo. I think that guy's getting shot right there. I think that's, he's going over the line. That's an absolutely insane photo.
This is crucial. It forces back the Germans. They get to the Aisne. They start to dig in, and from there, race to the sea. It's unbelievable. They're not racing to the sea. They're trying to outflank each other.
These first
keep going
few
around
months
each
are
other,
very different from our usual image of the Western Front.
This is a war of movement. It's open warfare.
There are no trenches. It's fought in the open, obviously making use of whatever cover there was, so very often using drainage ditches at the side of fields, not proper big defensive positions.
Wow.
Nobody is expecting what's going to happen. They're just crashing into each other.
Not only is the nature of fighting different from the later war, the people fighting are different too.
The image of the 18-year-old Tommy is completely false about the BEF in 1914. They are a much bigger range of ages. They are not 18. They're sort of, a lot of them are in their early 20s.
Wow.
Some of them are older. If you get the NCOs, they could be any age up to 40. And of course the officers would also be older.
The British Army that goes to war in August 1914 was an entirely professional, regular army. There were no conscripts at all. These are all people who joined the army for a career. And the British Expeditionary Force were made up of all the battalions which had been on home service. And in peacetime, the home service battalions ran at just over half strength. So instead of 1,000 men in peacetime, there'd be 500 or 600 men, which meant that when the war broke out, the numbers had to be made back up to 1,000. And the way that was done was by recalling men who were on the reserve. What it meant in practice was that almost a half of each of those battalions that go to France are made up with men who are out of practice, who might not be that fit, who certainly haven't handled some of the weapons or the equipment before. And so, whilst the British Army does have incredibly good kit, it's certainly not the case that every single soldier that goes to France is in absolutely tip-top fighting condition.
This professional army is already being decimated. By Christmas, the British have lost nearly 90,000 men, but the German advance has been halted. Their dream of winning the war in a swift, overwhelming attack has failed.
It's amazing how
Both
they have
sides
crystal clear
dig
footage
in.
from the battlefield.
From now on, it's a siege.
How do you end up in a trench? People often wonder that. Well, the thing is, you're not intending to be in a trench. What happens? You're in a firefight with the Germans. They're shooting at you. You scrape with your little entrenching tool. You try and get anything. Men will hide behind a blade of grass, they'll always tell you. But you just try and get that 5 or 6 inches down, put the earth in front of you, and then make it a bit deeper.
Those first trenches come
It's
about
bonkers,
when both
isn't it?
sides literally can't get the better of one another, so that both sides on the opposite side of a field find themselves not being able to get any further forward and literally dig in where they are.
And as time goes on, what happens is that they join them together.
Turning it down,
And so
sorry.
from these little personal scrape holes gradually develops into, firstly, a sort of a longer bit of trench, an outpost, and then they're joined together, and gradually a front line develops.
By
So that's
November
how it happens.
1914, the trench network, if you like, has already started to evolve. It's still very crude. In most places, it certainly doesn't have the whole front line, support line, reserve line organisation that we'll see later. Its main purpose, the main purpose of all trenches, is simply to make it safer for soldiers to live. The minute that you get below the surface, you're out of rifle fire. You can still be got by artillery, but it's certainly much, much safer to move around in daytime if you can stay below the ground. So the trenches evolve, they connect with other trenches, but it's still a long way from what we would think of as a very well organised, proper trench with proper fire bays, which come later.
The Western Front we know is beginning to form. The soldiers are settling into trench life.
It's a miserable, boring existence. What marks
Those uniforms
it out?
are way
a
too
boring
clean.
routine, freezing cold. It's terrible.
These reenactors, they didn't go for it. Look how
typical
clean
day in
these
the
guys
trenches
are.
in
Come on.
1914
They're all
was
smiling.
very different to a typical day in the trenches later. For the majority of the war, most of the time the soldiers would work at night and they would sleep through the day because it was safer. But by the end of 1914, those lessons haven't yet been learned. So we still have a situation where soldiers are pretty much sleeping at night and then working during the day, with all the casualties you'd expect of fellas being picked off by German snipers just because they suddenly get careless.
That's crazy.
Sentries out. Sentries watching over no man's land. The rest of the men, during the daytime, often sitting there writing letters home or attending to trench maintenance. And this is the day it is spent. It's just boring.
Drainage in the trenches was often poor, making mud a constant problem.
I
used to think I knew what mud was before I came out here, but I was quite mistaken. The mud here varies from 6 inches to 3 and 4 feet, even 5 feet. And it's so sticky that my men used to arrive in the trenches with bare feet.
Having cold feet isn't just unpleasant. It's a serious danger.
Get your ass killed.
Men are being sent to hospital due to frostbite and trench foot.
This is soldiers just trying to make sure that they can keep their feet dry in really adverse conditions, taking the boots and socks and puttees off at least once a day, drying them off, putting a drier pair of socks back on. That was a crucial thing, because very, very quickly fellas would get trench foot if they didn't keep their feet dry.
How do you keep clean in the trenches? Well, there's a bit of a problem. How would you keep clean in a trench full of 18 inches of water and mud?
What they would do, they would get probably 3 inches of water in the bottom of the mess tin, which was what they called the D-type mess tin, because it was a sort of a D-shaped tin with a shallow lid. Half an inch of the water would be poured into the lid, and they would use that half inch to shave with. So you'd lather up your soap, you'd shave your face, make sure that you rinsed off the razor in the top half of the mess tin so you didn't get any of the bristles mixed up in the water that you're going to wash the rest of you with. And then the 2.5 inches left, you would use that to wash your face, you'd wash your hands, you'd unbutton your shirt, so you'd wash under your armpits, you'd just button it back up and dry yourself off, you'd unbutton your trousers, you'd have a rummage around and you'd do the same there, button yourself back up. And it is quite extraordinary, because should you ever do this, which I have on numerous occasions, it's just like having a bath. You really do feel clean, because what you've done, you've washed all the sweaty bits. So, despite not having much water, every day the fellas manage to keep themselves as clean as possible.
It's just as important to keep your equipment
They're really doing
clean,
a disservice here. I mean, they look way too clean.
Very often the image that we have from war films is these fellas completely and utterly caked in mud in First World battles.
World War I.
They would have to avoid that, because the minute you do that,
What is that?
you'll
What is
be
that
out of
one that
action
just
within
came
minutes.
out?
You won't be able to do the job.
All Quiet on the Western Front.
Obsessively, they would be cleaning weapons 2 or 3 times a day. All the rounds of ammunition would come out of the pouches. They'd keep those clean. They'd put them back in again, because that sticky mud, the minute that you've got it on your clip of ammunition, you push that clip of ammunition in the rifle, you've pushed all the mud in with it, by the 2nd or 3rd round it will jam.
Yeah. Yep.
One of the high points of the day is meal times. Or perhaps not.
In the trenches, you can forget hot food.
Yeah,
You're not going to
strategy,
get hot food. What you get is standard British Army rations. And that is aimed to feed the body. It's not to feed the soul, that's for sure.
British soldiers rarely cooked anything in their own trenches at this early part of the war, for the simple reason that if you create any form of smoke, you will simply invite German artillery fire.
So what do you get? You get the staples. Bully beef, now, we call that corned beef now. They're sick to death of it. If you were lucky, you got a loaf of bread. Sometimes you get cheese, and you get jam. Always plum and apple on the Western Front. And this is all you got. Repetitive, but enough to keep body and soul together. Does the army care about your soul? No. All they want is you fit to be able to fight. You've got enough calories, you've got the right sort of food to enable you to continue to fight for your country, and that's all they care about.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's never going to change.
To fill the time, soldiers would smoke,
that's why we need democracy.
Play cards, and dream of home.
They don't give a shit.
British soldiers were
send your ass off to die, whatever. Fuck
so
cares.
Certainly, most of them would have photographs of wives and girlfriends or family members. Those that could read and write would write letters endlessly whenever paper was available. I mean, it's very telling, really, that a lot of the letters that still survive from British soldiers throughout the entire war, nearly all of the surviving ones are the letters that they wrote home, because in practice, the letters that they received would very often be read numerous times before eventually being used when they went to the latrine.
Oh my God.
The night brought little relief.
How do you get to sleep? in the freezing cold. It's so cold. You're frozen to the bone. Now, that's an expression we use when we're waiting for a bus.
It tastes the same.
This
same
is
texture.
frozen to the bone. Your legs are covered in freezing cold water. You can't take them out and put them somewhere dry. You've just got to stand there.
So they literally sleep on the fire step. In some instances, they'll have built themselves crude shelters, very often with doors at this stage in the war, doors taken off houses nearby, which won't stop shell fire but might well keep the rain off. But most of the time they are just sitting on the fire step in the mud.
You try and find a sandbag to sit on, and you put your overcoat over your head and try and make a tent of it. And you'd huddle down under that, just sitting down, but it was a very, very broken sleep.
Yeah.
Sleeping is difficult in the front line. Very, very difficult. It's a horrible existence because you're so cold all the time. The men were exhausted. It's not to be forgotten how terrible an existence this was for the men at the front, because that explains a lot of what happens at Christmas 1914.
They're experiencing it right now on the Ukrainian front.
Things were scarcely better on the German side of no man's land.
Well, the daily life of a German soldier in the trenches at that period of time is very similar to that of a British soldier. Opposite the British regiments in Flanders and northern France in December 1914, a lot of the duty of the German soldier is devoted to somehow trying to avoid those trenches, to flood or to cave in. He's busy extending and fortifying on what he has, and all that in addition of keeping an eye on the foe, patrolling, keeping everyone supplied. At this early stage in this area of the front, the deep and nicely furnished dugouts that many people associate with German First World War trenches do not exist. So
just
life in trenches in
dirt.
winter is freezing cold, it's very wet, hygiene is poor, and many soldiers suffer from bowel problems, for example. It's bone-breaking, physically exhausting, and mentally draining routine.
And you know, bowel problems ain't no joke when you're on the front line.
Flanders,
you know,
it's just one great morass. Day and night.
It's a mild inconvenience in civilian life. It's life and
death. We have to wrap our
there.
legs up to our thighs in sandbags just to survive. On top of this all, this mad gun battle goes on across this forsaken plain, stretching out in front of us as flat as a tabletop, where it is dangerous
man. You didn't have
even to raise
money
your head
for ammo. You can't fire a few shots at that bitch.
The Germans are now fighting on two.
Sorry, I interrupted this long dead soldier's final words. Let's go ahead and listen to them.
Flat as a tabletop, where it is dangerous even to raise your head above ground during the day.
Yeah.
The Germans are now fighting on two fronts. Russian armies are pressing on their eastern border. French intelligence suggests the Germans are moving troops east to counter this threat. The French High Command believes the time is ripe for an attack.
Yeah, no,
traditionally
he'll risk all your lives.
Stops for the winter because the days are too short, the weather's too bad, and everybody needs the opportunity to regroup, to rebuild their armies, to resupply, ready for the campaign the following spring. However, as so often in the story of the British Army in the First World War, the French, who are the dominant partners in our coalition, say that what they really need is an attack by the British to keep the pressure on the Germans. Because there's also a very real feeling that the Germans are now relaxing. After the First Battle of Ypres, they didn't push through. They were now just settling down for the long haul. And that was something that the British and the French really didn't want to happen. They were very keen to keep the Germans on their toes and not give them the chance to dig in, not give them the chance to improve their defences and to push them out as quickly as they possibly could. And the inevitable happened, and they end up having to launch attacks with very little preparation, with very little artillery support.
Great.
In
Suicide
December,
missions.
What's often forgotten is that the French are still really intent on driving into the German lines. They launch a series of absolutely massive attacks. One on the 17th of December, smashing in the Artois area, that's near Vimy, and then a few days later they smash home again in the Champagne. Now, just to give you the scale of this, that's 250,000 men attacking, supported by 600 guns in the Champagne.
That's fucking
just
crazy.
Just think about that.
That's an
that's
ocean
more
of
than
men.
the whole British Army, and they're going over. That's just one of 2 major attacks. These attacks last for weeks. They are smashing into the Germans. They are intent on trying to win the war, break the lines, and get back to open warfare.
Wow.
By the time that these attacks are happening in mid to late December 1914, the British Army really is tired out. They've lost the majority of the old pre-war regular soldiers who've either been killed, wounded or captured in the first few months fighting. A lot of reservists have made up the numbers, and when the numbers of reservists had finally run out, they're replaced with Kitchener volunteers who are having to be sent to regular battalions just to make up the numbers.
Commander of the French, Joffre, he doesn't order Sir John French, but he intimates to him that it is expected that the British will do their bit. They also will attack. What he wants is the whole BEF to attack.
That's insane.
We water it down, then we water it down some more. We end up with just 2 battalions of Second Corps attacking.
It's before
the
before
Gordon
tanks,
Highlanders
but
and the Royal Scots.
automatic weapons
just
were a
two
big thing.
battalions, and that's all that goes over the top. Now, why is that bad? Well, if you attack on a narrow front, that means all the enemy to your right and all the enemy to your left can shoot into that area. Whereas if you attack on a broad front, it's obviously reduced.
Meat grinder.
I've just come from the trenches where I had my first baptism of fire. I will never forget. When I saw my mates knocked over, I felt a bit giddy. The ground was in an awful state. We were up to our knees in mud and water, shivering with cold.
This is terrible, and those 2 battalions are slaughtered, and you can picture the scene. When they go over the top, the whistles blow, the bombardment, if you can hear it, because there's not that many guns and they haven't got that many shells, the bombardment stops and they go across no man's land.
Thousands dead.
The Germans see you coming and they open fire. The tack, tack, tack of the machine guns. And then after a period, the shell fire starts. And the poor old Gordon Highlanders, the Royal Scots, are slaughtered in no man's land. Men falling all round them. They're only 2 weak battalions. That's all that's going forward. And they are slaughtered.
The attacks in December are an utter disaster. 1 battalion, the 1st Gordon Highlanders, loses 75% of their officers and over half their men, killed or wounded.
It's almost total obliteration.
And by the end, not 1 sector of enemy trench is in British hands.
As soon as we went up, the Germans let us have it, and we were going down like raindrops. As our trenches was only 70 yards apart, we retired and then made the second charge but received the same. It's like being in a blacksmith shop, watching him swing a hammer on red hot shoe and the sparks flying all around you. But instead of them being sparks, they were bullets.
And what are you supposed to achieve if you manage to get across?
Were still crawling back or being rescued from no man's land 2 or 3 days later. Imagine being wounded, lying there, bleeding, unable to walk. How are you going to get back? Imagine freezing cold beyond belief. Imagine what it must have been like for those men. It's difficult to imagine. It really is. I'm lost for words.
I mean, the actors are really not doing it any justice.
Our comrades dying and
you're screaming, you're
it meant certain
bleeding.
death if we'd moved. So we had to lay there from 6:30 until 8:15 in the morning. And as an angel sent down from heaven, it came over very misty, and this being our only chance, we made good of it. So we crawl halfway and then make a run for it. I could not see where we were going, so fell over our comrades who were dead.
The attacks and counter-attacks peter out in late December, leaving stalemate and stasis.
Is there any good side to this? Well, yes. One thing is that people are watching. People like Douglas Haig, who was commanding 1st Corps, and he was appalled by the nature of this attack. And when he made an attack at Neuve Chapelle, things still went wrong, but he'd learned. They attacked on a wider front. They had a bigger, smashing barrage. They targeted known positions of German machine guns. They took out German mortars. They tried to suppress German artillery fire before they went over the top. They used aircraft to map German positions to target the shell fire accurately. So the British Army is starting to learn. So even amidst the complete failures of those December attacks, the British Army was learning. But that's no good if you've been killed or wounded.
Yeah,
in those
exactly.
attacks.
Yeah, great. Thanks for figuring that out a little too late. Now I'm dead in a field. Oh, well, we learned lots of lessons.
Depressed. There's no two ways about it. It's freezing cold. It actually starts to snow in this period. The mud and water in the trenches starts to turn into slush and ice.
Awesome.
What are men feeling? They're feeling this war's not going to be over anytime soon. They can't see an end to the war. That means that they can't see an end to their personal torment.
On Christmas Eve, the frost comes. The battlefield is transformed. The mud hardens, the puddles freeze. There's a thick morning mist. There is something in the air. It's even felt back at British HQ, who issue this stern statement.
It is thought possible that the enemy may be contemplating an attack during Christmas or New Year. Special vigilance will be maintained during this period.
The enemy are contemplating something, but it isn't an attack.
We posted a tiny Christmas tree in our dugout. The company commander, myself the lieutenant, and the 2 orderlies. We placed a second lighted Christmas tree on the breastwork.
Something in the direction of the German lines caused us to rub our eyes and look again. Here and there, showing just above their parapet, we could see very faintly what looked like very small coloured lights. What was this? Was it some prearranged signals and the forerunner of an attack?
Things really start to change on Christmas Eve. Now, why is that? The German family would celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve. That's when they would have the big meal, that's when they'd give the presents. A lot of the traditions of the German Christmas are what we fondly think are ours. Christmas trees, that comes from Germany. On Christmas Eve, the Germans start to celebrate their Christmas. Their post is delivered from home. They've got their letters from their family. That makes them feel warm, even if they're freezing cold. They start to put up Christmas trees. They're sent lots of Christmas trees from home. They put them up in the trenches. They decorate them with candles.
Yeah, they didn't have Christmas ornaments.
Trees
what
appear
the
above
fuck?
their trenches with lights, and they start singing carols. How do the British react? Well, they're suspicious.
Suddenly, lights began to appear along the German parapet, which were evidently makeshift Christmas trees, adorned with lighted candles which burnt steadily in the still, frosty air.
We were very suspicious and were discussing this strange move of the enemy when something even stranger happened. The Germans were actually singing. Not very loud, but there was no mistaking it. We began to get interested. Suddenly, across the snow-clad no-man's land, a strong, clear voice rang out. No other sound but this unknown singer's voice.
Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht, alles schläft, einsam wach, nur das alte
It's a song of my people.
Hol der Knabe im lockigen Haar.
That's
And
pretty
then,
crazy.
You know, someone's singing Silent Night in German. Silent Nacht. And they join in, they applaud, they start to shout things backwards and forwards across no man's land.
Merry Christmas, Fritz. Merry Christmas, Fritz.
Merry Christmas, Fritzy.
Now, one thing that's interesting is a lot of the Germans could speak English. They're better educated than our lads, I fear. But that's not all. Many of them had worked as waiters or in butchers' shops in London, in Manchester, in the great cities. There were lots of Germans who'd lived in England. And therefore, there was quite a bit of they could shout out across no man's land. And of course, the British, cheery, chirpy, Cockney style, would shout back. So you've got lots of people who say, "How are you doing, Tommy?" And then the British would shout, "Waiter, waiter," because they've been German waiters. And this sort of banter goes across no man's land. And that's going on the night of the 24th, Christmas Eve.
Wow.
First the Germans would sing one of their carols, and then we would sing one of ours. And I thought, well, this was really a most extraordinary thing. Two nations, both singing the same carol in the middle of a war.
Dearest Dorothy,
almost like there's
just
really
a line
not much
from the
difference
trenches
between
on
us.
Christmas Eve. A topping night, with not much firing going on.
Why are we here again,
and both
guys?
sides singing. It will be
What's
interesting
going?
to see what happens tomorrow. My orders to the Khoi are not to start firing unless the Germans do. Best love from your loving brother, Arthur.
And they developed a warmer atmosphere than you might well have expected. Exactly as British generals had warned might happen if you live in close conjunction with the enemy. The Germans are there. They're clearly human. They are not the Pickelhaube monster. You can see them. They're over there celebrating Christmas. That's not a monstrous thing. That's recognisably human, isn't it?
On the German and British side, we can see men who share a deep cultural bond, and who are not only fighting one another, but also share the same deprivations, the weather terrain conditions in a foreign country, or far removed from their families and their loved ones at home. This is a cultural bond, and that is the driving force for the Christmas truce.
The goodwill on Christmas Eve is widespread, but there are sectors where there is no truce. One letter from an unnamed officer in the Rifles shows a hostility bred from his traumatic experience over the previous weeks and months.
Oh, interesting.
I found the Bosch's trench looking like the Thames on Henley Regatta night. They'd got little Christmas trees burning all along the parapet of their trench, no truce had been proclaimed, and I was all for not allowing the blighters to enjoy themselves, especially as they'd killed one of our men that afternoon. But my captain, who hadn't seen our wounded going mad and slowly dying outside the German trenches on the Aisne, wouldn't let me shoot. However, I soon had an excuse as one of the Germans fired at us, so I quickly lined up my platoon and had all those Christmas trees down and out.
And on Christmas Eve, a lot of Germans had put little candles in jam jars all the way along their parapets, and Colonel Scott Shepherd of the Worcesters refers to his men shooting them out one after the other, which was a sort of true spirit, Christmas spirit of 1914 in some places.
Yeah.
Towards midnight,
it wasn't like this everywhere.
There seemed to be some commotion in the enemy trenches, and shortly afterwards, a lantern was raised above the enemy parapet. We were immediately ordered to open fire, and thus, what was undoubtedly a friendly gesture was brutally repulsed.
And the French, on the whole, seem less keen.
The Christmas truce is a collection of individual incidents that happen spontaneously all along the front line, mostly between the British and Germans, in some places between the Belgians and Germans, in some places between the French and Germans, although it's fair to say that because France and Belgium have been occupied by the Germans, they're not quite so keen on trucing as the British are.
The war diary of one German unit, facing the French, comments,
"On both days of the Christmas festival, the bloody game continued."
Jesus.
Dawn.
The bloody
on Christmas
game
Day
continues.
1914. It's another misty morning, and the British soldiers are getting their Christmas presents.
Oh, thank you very much, mate.
The British public and British industry responded fantastically
Smear some
to having
mud
their
on your
British
face,
Expeditionary
man.
Force in France and Belgium
You're an
at the end of
actor.
1914. All sorts of companies provided gifts and chocolate and woolen goods and comforts. But the most significant gift was the gift from Princess Mary, who set up a gift fund towards the end of 1914 to send a gift from herself and the women of the empire to all of those soldiers and sailors who were serving in, well, literally across the world at Christmas 1914. And it was a staggering undertaking because every single soldier fighting on the Western Front received a gift, and it fell into roughly two categories as far as the soldiers were concerned, which was about 2/3 of them were for smokers and a third were for non-smokers.
But for many, the true gift of Christmas Day is the peace.
The silence seemed extraordinary after the usual din. From all sides birds seemed to arrive, and we hardly ever see a bird generally, which shows how complete the silence and quiet was.
Wow.
It was Christmas Day. It's foggy at the start. And what becomes apparent is you can see the Christmas trees, the German Christmas lights. And gradually, the Germans start shouting across, and people start showing themselves. Engländer! And it's Christmas Day. You don't shoot them. And people get more and more bold on both sides. They're shouting out to each other, Tommy! And they're gradually engaging, and gradually the bolder spirits start to climb out of the trench and wave, that kind of thing. And you get both sides starting to respond to each other.
Wow.
And then once you're visible, no one's shooting. So you move into no man's land. It's quite an amazing process. It involves an incredible amount of trust. And that's interesting because they don't trust each other. So it's a strange phenomenon.
The soldiers...
As the soldiers emerge from the trenches, they get a clear view of their enemy for the first time.
The British began to wave to us,
totally
and our men returned the gestures. Gradually, they left their trenches. Nobody thought of opening fire. That which only hours ago I should have thought was nonsense, I now saw with my own eyes.
Truces were a very common thing in warfare and always have been. Both sides would often take the opportunity just to have a truce, to clear the battlefield, to bury the dead, and just take a breather. But the Christmas truce was quite different. Both sides spontaneously in different places deciding just to stop fighting for a few days was quite unusual. But I think that it's really important to say that it was of its time, and it was of its time because of the people that took part as much as anything.
Yeah, it would never happen in this day and age.
In many places, the initial motivation for the Christmas Day truce is to bury the dead.
At about 9 a.m. on Christmas Day, an English officer, accompanied by 2 of his men, came across and asked for a ceasefire until midnight to bury the dead. This was willingly granted.
The officer came out. We gravely saluted each other, and I then pointed to 9 dead Germans lying in midfield and suggested burying them, which both sides proceeded to do. We gave them some wooden crosses for them, which completely won them over, and soon the men were on the best terms and laughing.
How fucking grim.
And in at least one sector, the British and the Germans come together for one of the most memorable religious services of the First World War. With the dead buried, it's time to celebrate Christmas together.
British and Bavarians, previously the worst of enemies, stood there shaking hands and exchanging items.
They're just so sick of the killing.
One came up to me, shook my hand and gave me some cigarettes.
Wow.
Another gave me a handkerchief. A third signed his name on a field postcard, and a fourth wrote his address in my notebook. Everyone mingled and conversed to the best of their ability. It was a moving moment. Between the trenches stood the most hated and bitter enemies and sang Christmas carols. All my life, I shall never forget the sight.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just you think that while you were eating your turkey and that, I was out talking and shaking hands with the very men I'd been trying to kill a few hours before. It was astounding.
You will hardly credit this, but it is the truth. Fancy shooting at the Germans and going over to wish them a Merry Christmas. I don't think it's happened in the world's history before. You would have thought that peace had been declared.
This was my first sight of them at close quarters.
Should have been.
Here they were, the actual practical soldiers of the German army.
Should have been the start
There was not an atom of hate on either side that day.
of a paradigm shift.
We just said how bloody it was in that mud, how we hated it all. They said, we are Saxons, you are Anglo-Saxons, why are we fighting? The Russians can't fight, the French won't fight, and you're the only people who do fight. Why are we doing this? We laughed and chaffed each other for about half an hour in no man's land. We shook hands, wished each other good luck. One fellow said, will you send this off to my girlfriend in Manchester? So I took his letter, franked it, and sent it off when I got back.
It's bananas!
A German lighting a Scotchman's cigarette and vice versa, exchanging cigarettes and souvenirs. Where they couldn't talk the language, they were making themselves understood by signs, and everyone seemed to be getting on nicely. Here we were, laughing and chatting to men whom only a few hours before we were trying to kill.
Wow. These bastards who give themselves awards and
There's
fucking
an exchange
medals.
of gifts. Now, what do they give each other?
Telling thousands of millions of
I think
men
we
to
get the better
die.
out of this, the British, because what happens is the Germans will give you cigars, or perhaps a German lager. What do we give them? Well, tin of bully beef. Well, I'm not sure that's a good exchange. But there's a small exchanges of gifts. Lots of them refer to cigars being given. And there are many, many photographs. That's why there's never been the slightest doubt that this was a widespread process. Photographs taken, and that they engage in banter. Some of them debate the war. That's not a good idea. It doesn't generally go too well.
The events of Christmas 1914 are, in my opinion, a clear indicator that the cultural similarities between the British and the Germans, and which include the shared Christmas tradition, were in many cases stronger than any kind of culturally driven hatred or state propaganda on both sides. And you can rationally explain a ceasefire negotiation with the need to bury the fallen, but that doesn't explain why soldiers of the Bavarian 16th Reserve Infantry Regiment, for example, in which the young Adolf Hitler served, danced with British troops in no man's land. And it doesn't explain why in front of the lines held by the 6th Bavarian Reserve Division, many hundreds of German and British soldiers met up and mixed between the lines, singing hymns and exchanging gifts and letters, or why group photographs of smiling German and British soldiers exist.
Show us some of these fucking photographs. What are we doing? Show me some photographs.
Between the trenches and were the greatest pals.
I'm sick and tired of seeing
We
these
had a rare
fucking
old jollification,
10-cent
which included
reenactors here, too
in which
afraid
the
to put
Germans
mud
took
on their
part.
face. Show me these pictures.
The most famous moment of the Christmas truce is the football match. But on this, controversy reigns.
Football obviously crops up every time that the truce is mentioned.
So many pictures. Shows
and I think
none
it's
of them.
important to see it in context, in perspective, really, because football actually plays a tiny, tiny part in the Christmas truce. All of those activities of sharing stuff, swapping buttons, swapping food, swapping photographs, all of that stuff's going on, singing together, drinking together. And only in a tiny, tiny handful of places is there any sign that the British and the Germans played football together.
Now, football is something that is inextricably linked with the Christmas truce. The evidence for it is difficult to find. There are signs that there was some football play. Now, was there a big football match with, 11-a-side played over with rules, a referee and the rest of it? No, I can say that.
Played a
no.
friendly game.
Was there some sort of kickabout? Well, the evidence for this is mixed.
Yeah.
Without doubt, there are some letters and diaries that mention football.
Soon a couple of Englishmen brought a football out of their trench and the game started. This was also wonderful and unusual. That's also how it seemed to the English officers. That's indeed the effect of Christmas, the festival of love, that the hated enemy should for a short time become a friend.
Why a short time?
A huge crowd formed, and we found a little rubber ball, so of course a football match came off, and we exchanged various things.
So the evidence points to there being some football played on Christmas Day 1914, but nothing approaching a full game.
Okay, we'll show that after
the thing that always strikes me is that when you do see a big group of men playing football in a pretty much an open piece of farmland, even if you've got a lot of other men scattered around, it would have been a spectacle. It would have been seen by an awful lot of people, and there would have been a lot more people writing about it. And in most of the accounts, they talk about all sorts of other things that they very rarely talk about football, which really suggests that football wasn't such a big thing at all.
This means that you have to look at balance of probabilities.
What, is there like a big game in the UK over this?
Can we be certain? No. Balance of probability. Was there some sort of kickabout? Yes, I think there was some sort of kickabout. But that's all it was. Just a kickabout.
Yeah,
as Christmas Day draws to a close,
the ref got out there.
The men shake hands for the last time and head back to their own trenches. They know the significance of what's just occurred.
Even as I write, I can scarcely credit what I have seen and done. This has indeed been a wonderful day.
Today we have peace. Tomorrow you fight for your country, I fight for mine.
You can do. You don't have.
Good luck.
He hit his hat. Do a second take.
I left our friends on Christmas Day in a quiet mood. I stood upon the parapet and had a final look around, and not a shot was fired.
One of the officers, a captain, clasped his hands together and looked towards heaven and said, "My God, why cannot we have peace and let us all go home?"
The following few days see a gradual return to war.
The ending of the truce is a bit like the start. It starts in many different ways across the line, and the ending, it finishes in many different ways at different times. So for some, it's just Christmas Day, and that's it. Next day, they're back to shooting. For some, it lasts almost a week. It's amazing. How does it end? Well, it ends in many different ways. You get a new battalion come into the line. Remember, the British are changing over all the time. New battalion arrives. We're not having any of this truce. Open fire. Well, that ends the truce quick enough. Sometimes it's the guns, the Royal Artillery or the German artillery. They're not in a truce, and they open fire, and that ends the truce. There's a myriad of different ways it ends, but it ends
Thank you, Clutch Cargo. Merry Christmas.
It's not reality. The truce isn't reality. It's like a fairy tale. It's like an interregnum. It's just a break in the real business of war.
It's a fantasy.
That's what they're there for, and that's what they get back to.
It's ironic that an event that has had such an enormous cultural impact made absolutely no difference to the course of the First World War.
When it came to it, the troops went back to war willingly. They'd enjoyed the truce. It had been a chance to do what they wanted to do. It's not a flowering of sort of the human spirit. It's not a sort of goodwill to all men. It's not any great love of the Germans. It is all about them. They've got what they wanted out of it. They've got a break. They've improved the trenches. They've got rid of them bodies. And now it's time to go back to reality. It's time to go back to war.
The Christmas truce didn't happen again for a number of reasons. Apart from one very, very minor truce with one unit where a couple of officers were given a hard time over it. In most places, the British Army had made sure that artillery would continue all the way through Christmas Day, that offensive machine gun fire would carry on, that sniping would carry on, to make sure that there was no conditions for the truce to start.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably true to say that there was probably more firing on Christmas Day than there had been, in some of the days leading up to it. But I think the other thing to remember is that by Christmas 1915, there was no taste for it either. Those pre-war regular soldiers, those hard-bitten regulars who just wanted to take a day off out of the muck and mud in 1914, had nearly all gone. So, not that they'd all been killed, but many of them had been, they'd gone home, they'd been posted to other units, they were training soldiers, or they'd been captured. But by Christmas 1915, the vast majority of men by that time in France were territorials, or they were new army men of Kitchener Volunteers, people who joined the army specifically to kill the Germans. Not a professional army who would have just as happily killed the French or the Belgians or anyone else, but people who specifically had joined the army to kill the Germans. And by that time, a lot of them were already in a position where they'd had friends or relatives who'd been killed. So they got no interest in meeting with the Germans for a truce.
To many historians, the message of hope is overshadowed by the fact that the real peace is as far away as ever.
I think one of the reasons why it's become so popular in the public imagination is that people have sort of fallen in love with a kind of romanticised version of the truce. People have got this idea, and it's often promoted, that the truce was somehow about man's humanity to man, and it was somehow about peace and goodwill to all men, whereas the absolute reality is that by the end of 1914, they are still mostly hard-bitten, regular soldiers. Really, the men that Wellington referred to as the scum of the earth when he was praising his own army. These were hard-drinking, hard-fighting, hard-swearing professional soldiers. And they'd just seen the opportunity just to take a couple of days off. You know, to them, war was business. There was nothing personal in it. They got no real dislike of the German army. And because of that, it meant that you could just take a couple of days off. And then 2 or 3 days later, you'd have no compunction shooting the same fellas that you'd been chatting to and swapping drinks with through the head, because it was purely business. It was nothing personal. And I think that that's something that's often missed. You know, this was not man's humanity to man. This was a bunch of cynical, hard-bitten, very hard soldiers just taking the opportunity just to have a couple of days off and a couple of days rest from all that misery and mud.
When it comes to it, those people that they met in No Man's Land, that they were photographed with, that they'd shook hands with, they'd played football with, that those people, within a matter of days, they were willing to shoot at, to put a bullet through their brain, to bayonet if it came to it. And that is the real human nature. That's, if you like, the blackness of the human spirit.
Yeah.
You could see a man, you could shake hands with him, smoke his cigar, and you're perfectly willing to kill them.
Fucking eliminate him. Yeah.
And yet,
that's why we need checks and balances.
Many who were there did report feeling something special. A brief interlude of peace that we remember to this day.
The whole thing is extraordinary. The men were all so natural and friendly. The Germans have no bitter feelings towards us.
It was a Christmas celebration in keeping with the command Peace on Earth, and a memory which will stay with us always.
Yeah, so there you go, folks. That's the Christmas truce. Very fascinating. Oh, okay, finally. Finally showing some of these photos. Why did you not include these in you put these in the credits? What a weird decision. What a weird decision. And then you make them smaller? Wow. The editor, a lot of weird choices here from the editor. Let's just get these a little bigger here. Here we have some photos from the truce. 3 photos? 3 photos from the truce. Wow. What weird decisions. I gotta say though, they found the right guys to talk about it. Like the historians that they hired to speak about this were really good. They did a really great job, giving us the full scoop there, and trying to give us the full breadth of the the situation. I thought they painted a really good picture. So here's strategy members link here. More pictures from the Christmas truce. Pretty amazing stuff. Pretty amazing stuff. Look how young they are. I wonder if we can find some of the older ones here. Oh, just a couple pictures. Well, that is fascinating. The Christmas truce, y'all. The Christmas truce. That was really cool. The hell is it? Pot noodle? Ooh, I want some pot noodle. Do they even still make pot noodle? You think human beings are warlike by nature? War does seem to be a historical rule rather than the exception. I don't know by nature. I don't know, but it does. I gotta say, it comes pretty natural to me. This desire to destroy, to defame, you know. I mean, they make cup noodle. Yeah, maybe they were bought. Yellow Pages. Wow, what a relic. Smack your TV with it. Oh, wow. Palm Pilot? Oh, Sega Saturn. Yes. What? The fuck is this? A microwave? $100. Not bad. What is it, 100 pounds? Well, folks, there you go. The Christmas truce. Absolutely fascinating story. And yeah, Clutch Cargo. I mean, Is it this? There is something about each individual human being. Whoa. There is something about each individual human being that creates these warlike scenarios over and over and over again. And I think that's why the founding fathers were so brilliant when, you know, they intentionally created a system that accepted human corruption as a reality and said, we're going to check and balance against that. We're not going to put all of our power in one, you know, chair in one branch. And then, you know, and then it's all good for a couple years because we like the guy. And then, you know, different guy gets in there and he has all this power and he does the complete opposite. And everyone's lives are turned upside down because of one man's ego. So, I mean, you know, what? The South Park pendants? Oh, these are terrible. I feel like I have lived my life in a period where the peace after World War II kept me from having experienced war, but I'm concerned the world seems to be falling apart. We've never lived in a more peaceful time, but we've never lived in a time that, you know, where the weapons are more, or have never been more capable of mega death scenarios, you know, as we saw with, as we're currently seeing with Gaza. In just a couple days go by and you can kill 10,000 people, no problem. Welcome back, Woke Patriot. Looks like you got here right at the end. Sorry you missed the documentary. Hopefully everyone's having a Merry Christmas. By the way, Merry Christmas, everybody. We watched the Christmas Truce documentary. It was very interesting. I want to show your William S. Burroughs video next year. I think that is such a good video. Fragrant bath pearls. I somehow feel like we should have tried to beat the post-Napoleonic peace just for like 5 more years of peace. What is this commercial? Homeless Santa? Why is Homeless Santa selling me food? What the what? Iceland. Father Christmas. Okay. I don't know how that's supposed to get me to go buy food, but all right. Those are good deals. Yeah, there you go. I mean, you know, the Christmas truce is fascinating because it, you know, what I think the lesson to be learned from that documentary is that the Christmas truce is less about man's inherent desire for peace and more about how man is willing to give up that peace for power and control. Or in the case of these professional soldiers, a paycheck. They went right back to it. You know, for a paycheck. You know, as the historian said, you know, these guys were very cynical and it was just a job, and you know, they were just professionals, kind of like, you know, when, you know, professional rivals in any kind of field, they, you know, they have dinner together or something, you know, they, you know, there's a cordial kind of relationship there. There's nothing natural about war. In other words, it's entirely artificial. So why are we so good at it? You know, why does it, you know, and why does nature, war is a very common thing in nature. You know, there's all kinds of, I mean, there's a goddamn, the coyotes right outside my window here in the nature belt are having a war. Every goddamn night there's a battle. You know, and you got ants, you got bees. So why is it, you know, if it's artificial, I mean, the thing is that I'll leave these questions to the philosophers, to the professionals. Welcome back, Davin. Yeah. I'll leave these philosophical questions to the professionals. For me, it's like, I go back to what I was saying earlier. This is why the founding fathers created a system of checks and balances. This is why they said, no more kings, no more, no more gods, no more of this nonsense where all the power of government sits in the hands of one person, or a very small group of incredibly powerful tyrants. No more of that. We're gonna split up power. They looked at power. Okay, how does a government work? How does power originate from a government? They split that into 3 branches, right? And they said, okay, we're going to balance these branches against each other because of the inherent corruptibility of mankind. We're going to have elections, and term limits in some cases. It did, some of the term limit stuff came later. Wow. Commercials were weird back then. These look like parodies. Like freaky people smiling at me. If I was doing mushrooms watching TV in the 80s and 90s, I don't know if I might lose my mind. But yeah, that, the story of the Christmas truce is really about man's, how comfortable man is killing each other. How it doesn't, all the cries, the cries for humanity and the cries for, peace and sanity, fall on deaf ears. They go wild. Yeah, Japanese ads are really fantastic. They really are. The Schwarzenegger ones are really amazing. Okay, let's end the stream with one classic. One classic Japanese ad. No, this isn't even Japanese, but it might as well be Japanese. But everybody, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I'll probably do another stream before the New Year, maybe even a New Year stream. Not on New Year, because I like to watch the ball with my wife. Right? We do that together. Do that with the new boy. But hope you have a happy New Year. And if I don't see you until then, be safe. Give your mom a call. Call up everybody. Is Christmas too commercial? But first, these 3 shopping tips. All right, everybody. Merry flippin' Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. And, I'm going to do 2024 totally sober instead of completely fucking blitzed. Because it's going to be an absolutely crazy, crazy year. So this is kind of the calm before the storm. I think 2024 is going to be a very, very interesting year. We'll just say interesting and try not to be negative, but brace yourselves, folks. 2024 is going to be one hell of a fucking ride. So here we go, folks. Have a good one.
Body powder that you can spray? What could be next? Skin. I nurture my skin. Shh. No, tell everyone. Do the gold bond tingle. I nurture my skin. Foot powder spray. I nurture my skin. Gold bond. No, tell everyone. I get supple. I nurture my skin. Stay cool with gold bond. No, tell everyone. I get supple. Man up. I nurture my skin. Gold bond. Man up. No. Foot powder spray. Man up. I nurture my skin. I get supple. No. Man up. Man up. I nurture my skin. Man up. No. Stay cool. Man up. I nurture my skin. Gold bond. Man up. No. Foot powder spray. Body powder that you can gold bond.
Merry Christmas, everybody.